In most royal courts, disagreements ended with treaties, duels, maybe a strongly worded letter. In Prague, they opened a window, and when a group of angry Bohemian nobles hurled two imperial governors out of Prague Castle in 1618, they didn't just start a riot, they started a chain reaction that would burn through Europe for 30 years, kill millions of people, bankrupt kingdoms, redraw the political map of the continent, and permanently prove that workplace disputes should never be handled architecturally. To understand how one airborne government official triggered continental catastrophe, we need to talk about the Holy Roman Empire, which Voltaire later described as neither holy, nor Roman, nor an empire. And honestly, fair. The Holy Roman Empire wasn't a single unified country like France or England, it was a giant patchwork of more than 300 states, duchies, bishoprics, principalities, and free cities. Imagine if every country in Europe had its own ruler, army, taxes, laws, and religious arguments. The emperor technically ruled over all of it, but in practice, his authority depended heavily on whether local rulers felt like cooperating that week. The real problem began a century earlier. In 1517, Martin Luther challenged the Catholic Church, triggering the Protestant Reformation. And Europe reacted exactly how you'd expect powerful governments to react to radical ideological change. Calm and reasonably. In 1555, the Peace of Augsburg attempted to stop the violence. It introduced the principle of cuius regio ius religio, meaning whose realm is religion. In other words, rulers could decide whether their territory would be Catholic or Lutheran, which sounds stable until you realize it completely ignored Calvinists, radical Protestants, and the fact that humans rarely enjoy being told what to believe. For decades, tensions simmered beneath the surface. Catholic rulers worried Protestantism would fracture imperial unity. Protestants feared that Habsburg emperors wanted to erase their religious freedoms entirely, and everybody feared everybody else. Nowhere was this tension more explosive than Bohemia. Bohemia already had a long tradition of resisting Catholic authority. A century before Martin Luther, Czech reformer Jan Hus criticized corruption in the church. The church responded by executing him for heresy in 1415, which, historically speaking, is a fantastic way to ensure people remember your criticism forever. His followers, the Hussites, launched decades of religious wars. So by the 1600s, Bohemia already had deep cultural memories of anti-Catholic resistance. This wasn't some sudden outburst, it was generations of tension waiting for a spark. Then came Emperor Rudolf II. Rudolf wasn't exactly history's most stable ruler, he was deeply interested in alchemy, astrology, and the occult. So naturally, he was Holy Roman Emperor. In 1609, under heavy pressure from Protestant nobles, Rudolf issued the Letter of Majesty. This granted Bohemian Protestants significant religious freedoms, including the right to build churches and govern their own religious affairs. For a moment, it looked like compromise might actually work. Unfortunately, Europe had already developed a severe allergy to compromise. Then entered the Ferdinand of Styria. And Ferdinand believed compromise was for cowards. Ferdinand had been educated by Jesuits during the Counter-Reformation. He viewed Protestantism not merely as political opposition, but as a direct threat to salvation itself. This mattered because Ferdinand wasn't pretending, he genuinely believed he had a sacred duty to restore Catholicism. Across Europe, Catholic rulers were attempting to reverse Protestant gains. This movement, the Counter-Reformation, combined religious revival with aggressive political enforcement. Jesuit missionaries reopened schools, Catholic rulers imposed restrictions, and occasionally entire populations were given the choice between conversion, exile, or having an extremely difficult decade. When Ferdinand became King of Bohemia in 1617, Protestant nobles immediately feared he would revoke the Letter of Majesty, and that imperial officials shut down Protestant chapels. That's usually the moment in history when everyone should start backing away from the windows. A group of Protestant nobles marched into Prague Castle. They confronted two Catholic governors, Wilhelm Slavata and Yaroslav Berida of Martinis. And these were not random bureaucrats, they represented imperial authority itself. The nobles accused them of violating religious freedoms guaranteed under the Letter of Majesty. The governors denied responsibility. The shouting intensified, nobody de-escalated, one secretary reportedly attempted to hide, reasonable instinct. And then the nobles voted, not on policy. On whether to throw the governors out the window, one by one the officials were hurled from a third-story window of Prague Castle. They fell roughly 70 feet into the castle moat below, and somehow they survived. Catholic accounts claimed angels carried them safely downward. Protestants argued they landed in a pile of manure. Modern historians lean toward a combination of soft ground, luck, and physics, which is slightly less miraculous but significantly more believable. This wasn't just an isolated act of violence, it was open rebellion against the Habsburg dynasty. And in 17th century Europe, dynasties treated rebellion the way modern corporations treat piracy. They took it personally. After the defenestration, Bohemian nobles established a provisional government. They raised armies, and most importantly, they rejected Ferdinand entirely. The Bohemians offered their crown to Frederick V, Elector Palatine, a Protestant prince backed by anti-Habsburg factions. Frederick accepted, which was either courageous or one of the worst career decisions in European history. In 1620, Habsburg and Catholic League forces crushed the Bohemian rebels at the Battle of White Mountain. The battle itself lasted barely 2 hours. The consequences lasted centuries. Thousands of Protestant nobles fled, executions followed, property was confiscated, the Czech nobility was politically shattered. And the Habsburgs began aggressively re-Catholicizing the region. The Bohemian Revolt could have ended there, it didn't, because Europe in 1618 was basically a room full of armed rivalries waiting for an excuse. King Christian IV of Denmark intervened to support Protestant interests. He lost badly. Then came Albrecht von Wallenstein. One of history's strangest military entrepreneurs, he essentially built a private army for the emperor and financed it by letting soldiers live off the land, which sounds efficient until you realize the land contained people. Then Sweden entered the war under Gustavus Adolphus, a king so effective at warfare, historians still study his tactics today. He modernized artillery, he improved mobility, he transformed battlefield coordination. And he did all this while looking like a Viking king who accidentally discovered gunpowder. And then Catholic France joined the Protestant side because by this point, the war had evolved beyond religion. France feared Habsburg's dominance more than Protestantism, and nothing summarizes European diplomacy better than, "We oppose your religion, but we hate the other dynasty more." As the war dragged on, entire regions collapsed. Trade disintegrated, famine spread, disease followed armies, mercenary forces looted towns regardless of religion. Some German territories lost between 20 and 40% of their populations. In certain areas, wolves reportedly wandered through abandoned settlements. This wasn't glorious battlefield history anymore, it was societal collapse. Finally, in 1648, exhausted diplomats negotiated the Peace of Westphalia. It recognized state sovereignty, it weakened imperial authority, and it permanently changed European politics. Many historians see Westphalia as the foundation of the modern state system, the idea that countries should control their own internal affairs. So, strangely enough, modern international diplomacy partially emerged because several angry nobles once turned a castle window into a policy suggestion. The defenestration of Prague sounds absurd, and honestly, it was. But beneath the comedy sat real fears about religion, authority, identity, and power. The window was only the spark. Europe had already spent decades filling the room with gunpowder. History usually remembers emperors, treaties, and great armies, but sometimes the future changes because somebody loses an argument near an open window.